Welcome back to Q-Dad, it's me Steve, and yes, finally Season 3 of Foundation is upon us. And there's so much to uncover in this episode, like this new, more intellectual version of Dawn, and the fact they've introduced a character called Rando Mallow, giving us potentially a tease of what's to come. And most of the things that we've actually saw in the trailer for Season 3 did turn up in this episode, meaning there's plenty of surprises ahead. So let's dive in and discuss all the things we've seen today, like the new ruling of Dawn, plus our bearded day, and even the narration of Gale. And remember, we don't do book spoilers here. We're covering things from TV show aspect only, so please do be mindful in the comments. Also, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and keep up to date with everything Foundation. Now, we won't be touching on the intro in this episode, but Ben will be bringing you a breakaway video with a side-by-side comparison of the opening scene and how it shifted from Season 1 and 2, and we'll be breaking down what this means for the season. So, let's get into it. The episode, of course, starts off with us flying through a model of psychohistory, which was a great visual. This is then accompanied by the narration of Gale, who informs us that it has been 152 years since the Second Crisis. Now, whilst I'm talking about Gale, I must mention that this does feel like quite a lot of narration in the episode, compared to that of the previous two seasons. And Ben's got a little point on this towards the end, so make sure you stay tuned for that. But she goes on to say that the Foundation now owns the whole of the Outer Reach, which is around 800 planets, and that they're still pushing for the Middle Bank, putting some of the pressure on Empire. And in this episode, throughout the narration, we learn that Empire is declining at a rapid rate. We then learn of a stronghold planet called Galgon, which is almost like a neutral planet, and rests in the Middle Bank, which the rest of the planets of this section will follow it. And of course the Mule knows this and ends up taking it for himself. And we don't have to wait long in this episode before we get to see the Mule, as we witness him taking on pretty much an army of people, several ships and a battalion of troops, and yet he does this single-handedly, well, using his mentalic powers. He essentially confronts Archduke Balleron and seems to have taken his daughter for ransom. And of course, the Mule asks to be warlord of Galgon. And when this is refused, this is actually then when he instigates the battle, where the Mule changes the minds of both the pilots and the infantry to unleash absolute carnage. This kills everyone except for the Archduke, and then in a very unexpected and horrific moment, the Mule forces him to bite off his own finger just so he can get the signet ring. That was such a crazy scene. This scene just shows the level of power that the Mule has, single-handedly corrupting the mind of hundreds of people. So imagine that power in the wrong hands. What could he do to Empire? But of course, I believe that the final kind of confrontation must be between him and Demerzel, simply for the fact that he would not be able to control her mind at all, with her being a robot. And just while we're here, getting a grasp on the Mule's power, how long did he have to wait in hiding to be able to push his agenda into people's minds? How fast can he do this? Could you, for example, point a gun at him and by the time you're ready to fire, he's already messed with your mind? Or does it take time and planning? Is this all the power of the Mule himself? Or, like with Talon Bond, does he somehow have a gathering of mentalics helping him? Either way, it was a spectacular scene and a really good way of showing us how the Mule could essentially bring the downfall of humanity. One last thing as well. He explained that he pushed a thought into the minds of people for them to act on. Does this mean you can train to negate it? Is it only a slight push on your mind? So if you know it's coming, can you essentially negate the effect? The episode continues. We learn that Empire now has to travel using jump gates. And again, this is echoed with Gale's narration, that this is because the Empire is drifting further away from control. And of course, lost the use of spacers at the end of Season 2. Now, the next scene we see is with Demerzel and Dawn looking into the Prime Radiant. And it seems that they have noticed a bit of a glitch at the end, a potential third crisis. Now, it is hinted here that Demerzel does check the Radiant on a daily basis, and sometimes multiple times a day, as we learn later in the episode. And of course, she is teaching Dawn this, and I'm pretty convinced here we don't know what number Cleon this is, but I suspect we will see him turn into a version of Day later in the series. They head their way to the Galactic Council. This is where Dawn has his very sophisticated head switched on, and almost acts like Dusk in this moment, as they orchestrate someone to throw dirt at him, as well as almost essentially forcing the council to make a decision sooner rather than later, which I thought was impressive to see. We then get to see this era's dusk as he watches several versions of darkness disappear into their final moments, which is quite a touching moment actually, because it does state that he's not quite sure if running in the final moment would be considered fearful or cowardly due to the fact they actually showed their true intent. And then we move across the galaxy to see where Foundation settled after Terminus was destroyed, and it's on a planet now called New Terminus, which could have been a little bit better named, but saying that major parts of the states are called New something. But it's very interesting here that the person trying to get in touch with Harry is a guy called Ebling Miss, and it turns out that Ebling is actually a descendant of Xylus, who was one of the ones who persecuted Harry within Season 1 when Cleon the 12th questioned him on psychohistory. So actually, that little connection there was very interesting. And then essentially he asked one question at the end on why give the Prime Radiant to the enemy, which then ultimately got him kicked out. But I agree, why? So my thought is that Harry at that moment, because Hebling was assuming that Demerzel and Empire were the enemy, kicked him out because that was the wrong mindset, when actually there is a grander threat at scale, which of course is the Mule and that looming darkness of the third crisis. And of course, I do love the clip where Harry was swearing.
Fucking hell! You've nulled my nullfield.
Genius, and it had never been done before. And finally, I love the line where Ebling says, "The man, the myth, the legend," and Volt Harry says, "You have the myth, but the man is elsewhere." Now, I just love this line, but it does also make me think that Volt Harry still despises the fact there's a second Harry out there, essentially doing what he likes, making a second foundation to make sure this foundation follows its path. We then get another great planet, which is Haven, the Alliance of Traders' home. Now, it's mentioned here that the planet Haven is 260 degrees when the sun is out and negative 180 when it's not, and the only optimum time to travel around the planet is when the moon casts a shadow over the surface, which brings the temperature down to a cool 55 degrees, which for those of you wondering, because I'm in the UK, would be around 12 degrees Celsius here, so a nice breezy day really. But of course, this is where we see that awesome kind of race on those speeders from the trailer, and we also see the death, or presumed death, of Rando Mallow, which obviously we question if he's a descendant of Hobe Mallow, but the fact we didn't even really get much of a conversation with him, he was just killed off, is a bit weird, and it was unusual. However, that race was epic. We kind of sped across the surface of the planet, and just even the slightest touch outside of the shade burnt people to a crisp. But thankfully, our two new heroes were extracted safely and returned to New Terminus to discuss the potential opening of the vault. This is then where Pritchard steals the key and ship, of course going to investigate the Mule. And based on the trailer, I believe this is the guy who is the new love interest of Gale. So we can speculate here, he finds info on the Mule, then wonders to go and find Gale. At this point though, no one on Foundation 1 should know of Gale's existence, so it'll be interesting to see how he learns of her location, maybe even from the Mule himself. We then get one of the most interesting scenes I think in this episode, which was Demerzel inviting a new Zephyr Viralis, to have conversations with her, and those conversations will only stay between her, as her memory will be redacted and then restored every time they meet. And essentially, Demerzel opens up about her journey and her history with the robots and humans. So she mentions the 3 laws of robotics, and that robots found it increasingly difficult to know what would harm a human and what wouldn't, so devised a plan to create a new Zereth law, which is to look out for humanity as a whole and not as an individual. But of course, this led to a war, which was the robots fighting between themselves about what to do with humans, which some humans were involved in. She continues to tell an interesting story about how the orchard that's growing here, this golden apple, is the last place where the war ended. And what she mentions is that all of the robot bodies were melted down here and mixed in with the soil as fertilizer, and somehow produced this golden apple, which essentially has the fluids of robots running through it. Now, Ben did want me to mention, is it possible this is going down a biblical route? Does this apple represent a piece of fruit from the tree of knowledge in the Garden of Eden? Because if you consider that fruit for a second, that contains essentially all the data and all the mechanics of advanced intelligence. And of course, with the history that comes with it, So in the years to come, technically someone could get an apple and harvest the DNA from it, recreating intelligent life. It's just a wild theory, but do you agree? Let us know in the comments. It was also mentioned that the apple was poisonous to humans. Now for me, this kind of foreshadows that the use of intelligent living robots could always be poisonous to humans to some degree. I mean, look what happened. There was a whole robot war. But anyway, Demerzel shows Aurelis the Prime Radiant, which comes directly from her chest. A great hiding place, I must say. But lets us know about the dilemma that she's currently facing, or as she puts it, a paradox. Now my take on this scene is a little different. Firstly, I loved showing the golden apple, then Demerzel being told she has an apple that she couldn't eat. The irony or the intent in that scene, followed by the words, was not lost on me. But I wonder how much biomatter did the robots have to be able to have their fluid affect the apple of a tree. You would assume anything toxic to humans in the soil would have harmed the trees too. And then moving on to the paradox part, for me it almost seems like Demerzel is contemplating mortality or humanity in a way, as she now realises she's about to witness the one thing she's been tasked to save disappear. You could argue almost like her loved ones. And obviously humans go through this throughout their lives. So is this the first time in her history she has to actually think about the notion of a single being? Yes, I refer to them as single because for Demerzel they are all clear on the first. Let us know your thoughts on this. We'd love to hear your take on Demerzel's story. And then in the final moments of the episode we get to see Bearded Day, who again I'm still not sure what number Cleon this is, as I don't think it was mentioned in this episode. So I don't want to make any speculations at this time, but most likely the 22nd or 23rd. And it's not really clear why Day is living on the outskirts of the palace grounds and seems to, be fueled by these drugs, having a young lady called Song, and is actually not ruling, which of course forces Dawn to step up a little bit, 10 days early, but I hope we learn more about why he's the way he is. But Crazy Day is summoned back to the palace. It comes to light that the third crisis, or those dark ages that Harry predicted originally, will be here in 4 months, because that's when the model can no longer predict what is going to happen, meaning that there are variables out there that are going to spur on the dark ages, or prevent it. And just before the episode ends, as we've been on Gale watch the whole time, we get a shot of her dreaming about the mule before being woken up in her pod, showing us that this is now, once again, time for her and Harry to be involved on Ignis. And that's it, guys. Overall, the episode was pretty decent. There's a few questions that we're kind of left with, like where is Dawn that escaped from season 2? How did Bearded Day get into the position and mentality he's in now? And of course, will they be able to stop the mule? With only 4 months till the end, it seems as though there isn't much time. And clearly this time, Vault Harry isn't sending them any names or people to find like he did with Hober Mallow. But before we end, Ben did want to mention that he wasn't quite happy with this episode. He says that as much as it was good and informative, and we got loads of new great details and scenes and even new characters, he says that it felt different and rushed, almost like we're being force-fed information. It's just the way Gale explains the transition between seasons. When we had the transition from season 1 to season 2, the first episode of season 2 felt new, but didn't feel like the information was being rammed down our throats. Whereas this episode felt like we had to know certain things, and it felt like the narration of Gale was even more ramped up compared to normal. So, he just wasn't happy with that and wanted to raise it. Whereas I, on the other hand, enjoyed it. Now, is this because Ben had recently watched back-to-back episodes season 1 and 2? Whereas I, like you guys, had waited for season 3 to start? Maybe that's the reason. But for me, this episode needed to be slow. 152 years had passed. We needed bringing back into the story. It needed to show us who the main people in play are for this series. And also, how Empire is starting to crumble. Now, normally I would moan about a really slow episode 1. But that's normally because if episode 1 is really slow, the rest of the show is really slow and it doesn't give us the information we need. But based on season 1 and 2, I'm willing to let it slide because I know by episode 5 and 6 it will be in full swing with the climax of the season being set up, ready to grace our screens. And the writers have yet to let us down. So again, for me, episode 1 needed to be slow to start the build up to bring us better things. But let us know your thoughts on the episode. Did you enjoy it? Now, before I get on to our main questions to you, as I mentioned at the start of the episode, Ben will also be doing a side-by-side comparison and breakdown of the opening sequence and how that connects to season 1 and 2, and of course season 3. So if you haven't already, please do hit that subscribe button. And join us as we bring you all of our Foundation breakdowns and much, much more. Right then, my question to you. Do you think the Mule's working alone to implant all those thoughts? Do you think Vault Harry will reveal the truth of the Mule in 3 days' time when he's set to leave the vault? And finally, do you think we'll see Demerzel break free from her programming in this season? Let us know your thoughts on all those questions. So anyways, thank you for watching once again, and as always, I'll catch you next time with something new.